The explosion rocked the courthouse steps, sending plumes of smoke billowing into the crisp autumn air. Screams erupted from the crowd as people scattered in panic, everyone except Sophia Mendes, who stood frozen in place, her wide eyes fixed on the burning car that had just moments ago belonged to her father. Dad, Sophia screamed, lunging forward, only to be restrained by a police officer. Stay back, miss, it's not safe. But safety was the furthest thing from her mind. Her father, Judge Carlos Mendes, had been targeted because of the high-profile corruption case. He was presiding over a case involving some of the city's most dangerous criminals. As the ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, Sophia's world collapsed around her. 3 weeks later, Sophia sat in a sterile hospital room, her fingers intertwined with her father's motionless hand. The doctors had been clear his treatment would require experimental procedures not covered by insurance, costing millions. They did have. There has to be another way, Sophia whispered to the silent room, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights spent researching medical grants and loan options. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. The door swung open to reveal a tall, imposing figure, Alexander Sterling, the city's most notorious billionaire and owner of Sterling Enterprises. His steel-gray eyes surveyed the room with cold calculation before landing on Sophia. Miss Mendes, he said, his voice deep and emotionless. I believe I have a proposition that might interest you. Sophia straightened in her chair, instantly suspicious. Alexander Sterling's reputation preceded him, brilliant but ruthless in business and famously devoid of any warmth or humor. She'd encountered him briefly at charity gala where she'd worked as an event coordinator, but he'd never so much as acknowledged her existence. Mr. Sterling, this is hardly the time or place. Your father needs specialized medical treatment available only in Switzerland, treatment that costs approximately $8 million. He stated this as casually as if discussing the weather, not the astronomical sum that had been haunting Sophia's nightmares. Sophia felt her chest tighten. How do you know that I make it my business to know things, Miss Mendes? He stepped further into the room, his bespoke suit contrasting sharply with the clinical surroundings. I'm prepared to cover all medical expenses and ensure your father receives the best care possible. Hope surged through Sophia momentarily before suspicion clouded it. Nothing came free for men like Alexander Sterling. And what would you want in return? She asked cautiously. Alexander's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, something calculating and intense. Marriage, the word hung in the air between them. Absurd and impossible. Sophia laughed, a short, incredulous sound. You can't be serious. I'm always serious, Miss Mendes. I require a wife for business purposes. You need money to save your father. It's a simple transaction. Sophia stood up, indignation flaring. Marriage isn't a business deal. Alexander raised an eyebrow, unmoved by her outburst. In my world, everything is a business deal. You would have access to my resources, live in comfort, and your father would receive the treatment he needs. In return, you would fulfill the role of Mrs. Sterling at social events and business functions for a minimum of 1 year. Sophia glanced at her father's pale face, the beeping machines keeping him alive, and felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. The walls seemed to close in as the impossible choice confronted her: her freedom or her father's life. Why me? She asked softly, buying time to process the outlandish proposal for the first time. Alexander looked slightly uncomfortable. You have a reputation for intelligence, dignity, and discretion. You know how to navigate social situations, and you're presentable. His eyes flickered briefly over her, as if assessing merchandise. Sophia felt her blood boil at his clinical evaluation. But before she could retort, he continued, more importantly, you have no romantic entanglements that might complicate matters, and you need something only I can provide. It's efficient, she repeated hollowly. You're talking about my life. I'm talking about saving your father's life, he countered. The papers are already drawn up. You have 24 hours to decide. With that, he placed a business card on the hospital bed table and turned to leave, his movements precise and controlled. Mr. Sterling, Sophia called out, making him pause at the doorway. Has anyone ever told you that you have the emotional range of a calculator? For a split second, something that might have been amusement crossed his face. Regularly, Miss Mendes says. I'll await your call. As the door closed behind him, Sophia sank back into her chair, her mind racing. A marriage of convenience to the coldest man in the city, or watching her father die knowing she could have saved him. Some choice. What Alexander Sterling didn't know was that Sophia Mendes wasn't simply going to accept her Fate, if she agreed no, if she was going to sell her freedom, she was determined to make sure the arrogant billionaire got more, and he bargained for much more. Sophia stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her modest apartment, barely recognizing the woman. Looking back at her, 24 hours had passed since Alexander Sterling's proposal, and she'd made her decision. Not that there had ever really been a choice. You can do this, she whispered to herself, straightening her shoulders. 1 year, just 1 year of your life for Dad's entire future. Her phone buzzed with a text. The car is waiting downstairs, as of course he wouldn't even come up himself. Everything was a delegation in his world. Sophia grabbed her worn leather purse, a stark contrast to what would soon be her new life, and took one last look around the cozy one-bedroom apartment she'd called home for the past 5 years. The mismatched furniture, the wall of family photos, the bookshelf overflowing with dog-eared paperbacks, all spoke of a life built with love rather than money, a life she was about to leave behind. Sterling Tower pierced the skyline like a monument to ambition, all gleaming glass and sharp angles. Sophia felt underdressed in her simple navy dress as she was escorted through the lobby, acutely aware of curious glances from employees who clearly recognized her as out of place. Alexander's executive assistant, a frighteningly efficient woman named Vivian, who looked like she ironed her ponytail, led Sophia into a conference room on the top floor. Mr. Sterling will be with you shortly, Vivian said, her tone suggesting that shortly meant precisely when Alexander deemed appropriate. Not a moment sooner, Sophia didn't bother sitting down. Instead, she walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city sprawled below. Somewhere out there was the hospital where her father lay unconscious, unaware that his daughter was about to sign away her freedom to save his life. The view is one of the building's best features, came Alexander's voice from behind her. Sophia turned to find him watching her, his expression as unreadable as ever today. His tailored charcoal suit made his eyes look almost silver in the natural light. I prefer what's beyond the view, Sophia replied. Real people living real lives. Something like curiosity flickered across his face before he gestured to the conference table where a thick document lay waiting. The marriage contract, he explained unnecessarily. My lawyers have been thorough. Sophia approached the table warily. I brought my own lawyer. She pulled out her phone and pressed dial. Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. I wasn't aware. You're on speaker, Sophia announced as her best friend's voice filled the room. Is the Ice King there? Came Mia's irreverent voice. Hi, Mr. Fancy Pants. Just so you know, if you mistreat my girl, I know 17 different ways to make a death look natural. Causes. I watch a lot of true crime. Sophia suppressed a smile at Alexander's momentarily stunned expression. Miss Rodriguez graduated law school, top of her class, passed the bar first try, and currently works at the public defender office because, unlike some people, she has a soul. Sophia supplied. I've prepared some amendments to your contract, Mia continued. All business now. Sophia's emailing them over. And yes, before you ask, I am legally qualified to do this. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he motioned to Vivian, who had materialized at his side. She efficiently printed the email document. Perhaps we should discuss these amendments, Alexander said, scanning the pages with growing incredulity. Non-negotiable, Sophia stated firmly, channeling confidence. She didn't entirely feel you want a business transaction. Fine, but I'm not signing away my entire existence. I keep my job at the event planning company. I maintain my own bank account. I have veto power over public appearances if they can exceed with my father's medical appointments. And after our divorce, you will fund a foundation in my father's name for victims of judicial intimidation. Alexander studied her with new interest, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You've given this considerable thought? That's what happens when someone tries to purchase you, Mr. Sterling. You assess your market value. A charge filled the air between them as their eyes locked in silent challenge. Sophia refused to look away despite the thundering of her heart. After what felt like eternity, Alexander picked up a pen. Your terms are acceptable with one addition of my own. Sophia tends, which is you'll move into my penthouse immediately. For appearance's sake, he added, when she began to protest, the press would find it suspicious if we maintain separate residences. After the wedding, the word made everything suddenly terrifyingly real. When exactly is this wedding supposed to happen? Sophia asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Tomorrow, Alexander replied matter-of-factly. City Hall. I've arranged everything tomorrow, Sophia echoed incredulously. But that's efficient, he finished for her. Your father's airlift to Switzerland is scheduled for the day after. Time is of the essence. Miss Mendes. Sophia closed her eyes, briefly reminding herself why she was doing this. When she opened them, she reached for the pen in Alexander's hand, their fingers brushing momentarily. She ignored the unexpected jolt that ran through her at the contact. One more thing, she said, pulling her hand back quickly. In public you treat me with respect. No one can know this as anything but a genuine relationship. I won't be humiliated or treated like a possession. Alexander's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes shifted. Respect, perhaps, or surprise at her backbone. Agreed, he said simply. Sophia signed her name on the designated lines, each stroke of the pen sealing her fate. When she finished, she looked up to find Alexander watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Congratulations, Miss Mendes, he said as he added his own signature to the document. You've just become the future Mrs. Sterling. And you, she replied with forced sweetness, have just purchased yourself the world's most reluctant bride. For a fleeting moment, Sophia could have sworn she saw the corner of Alexander's mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing to humor she'd witnessed from him. I'll have Vivian coordinate the moving of your belongings, he said, rising from his chair. Is there anything specific you require at the penthouse? Sophia thought of her tiny apartment with its warmth and character, then imagined the sterile luxury that likely defined Alexander's home. Just one thing, she replied. A plant. Alexander blinked, clearly not expecting that request. A plant? Yes, something living to counterbalance all that steel and glass. I'm sure you surround yourself with. Sophia gathered her purse, suddenly eager to escape his unsettling gaze. Consider it the first of many changes coming your way, Mr. Sterling. As she walked toward the door, head held high despite the weight of what she'd just done, she heard him call after her. Sophia. She paused, surprised by his use of her first name. If we're to be married tomorrow, perhaps you should start calling me Alexander. Sophia turned just enough to see him over her shoulder. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Alex. She left him standing there, contract in hand, a bemused expression replacing his usual mask of indifference. Small victories, she told herself, as the elevator doors closed. In a war of wills against Alexander Sterling, she would take every small victory she could get. Little did she know Alexander was thinking precisely the same thing about her. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The city clerk closed her booklet with a snap, looking expectantly between them. You may kiss the bride. Sophia froze. This particular detail hadn't been covered in the contract. Alexander smoothly stepped forward, placing one hand lightly on her waist and bending to brush his lips against her cheek. His cologne, something expensive and subtle, momentarily overwhelmed her senses. For appearance's sake, he murmured into her ear, his breath warm against her skin. Sophia nodded stiffly, hyper-aware of the small audience of necessary witnesses, Vivian, the ever-present assistant, and Mia, who was shooting daggers at Alexander with her eyes, while simultaneously giving Sophia encouraging thumbs. UPS, outside City Hall, a sleek black Bentley waited, surrounded by a handful of photographers who appeared out of nowhere once Alexander emerged. Mr. Sterling, is it true you just got married? Alexander, who's the lucky woman over here? Look this way. Sophia instinctively recoiled from the flashing cameras. Alexander's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders, guiding her toward the car. Smile, he instructed quietly. This will be the most efficient way to announce our marriage. You planned this? Sophia accused under her breath, maintaining a forced smile. Of course, Alexander replied, opening the car door for her with surprising gallantry. Sterling Enterprises stock will rise 3 points by market close. Once news breaks of my settling down. Of course, he'd quantified even that. Sophia slid into the car, relief washing over her as the tinted windows blocked out the cameras. Alexander joined her in the back seat a moment later, immediately pulling out his phone and typing with rapid precision. Your father's airlift is confirmed for tomorrow morning at 7:00 a.m. The medical team reports he's stable for transport. Sophia felt a surge of gratitude cut through her resentment. Thank you, she said softly. Alexander glanced up, seemingly surprised by her sincere tone. For a moment, something almost human flickered in his eyes before he looked away back to his phone. It's part of our agreement still, Sophia insisted. Thank you for saving his life. Alexander shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to genuine expressions of gratitude. The penthouse has been prepared for your arrival. I had your belongings moved while we were at City Hall. Sophia's heart sank at the thought of strangers packing Upper personal items including my plant. The question seemed to catch him off guard. Yes, including your plant, he confirmed with the faintest hint of amusement, though I'm not certain it will survive. It looked unwell. Mr. Pickles just needs some attention. Sophia defended. You named your plant Mr. Pickles? Alexander asked incredulously. Don't judge me, Alex. We've been married less than an hour. The corner of Alexander's mouth twitched. Alexander, he corrected. Definitely Alex. Sophia countered, feeling an odd satisfaction at the tiny furrow between his brows. If she had to endure this arrangement, at least she could entertain herself by chipping away at his perfectly controlled facade. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a luxury building in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. As the private elevator ascended, Sophia's stomach knotted with anxiety. She was about to see firsthand how the other hat, or more accurately the other 0.1%, lived. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, revealing a space that managed to be both exactly what Sophia had expected and somehow still surprising. Minimalist design, monochromatic color schemes, spectacular views, all anticipated. But the space also featured rare art pieces that showed genuine taste, and most surprisingly floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with well-worn classics. You read? Sophia blurted out, then immediately flushed at how it sounded. Alexander raised an eyebrow. Did you think I processed information solely through spreadsheets and financial reports? The thought had crossed my mind, Sophia admitted, running her fingers along the spines of leather-bound volumes. First editions, some. Alexander acknowledged. My grandfather started the collection. Reading was the one fallacy he had permitted. Sophia filed away this rare personal detail. Where's this? My room, the East Wing. I've had the master guest suite prepared. My quarters are in the West Wing. Sophia relaxed slightly at the confirmation they wouldn't be sharing a bedroom. Not that she truly expected it, but still boundaries were important. I'll show you, Alexander offered unexpectedly, leading her through the sprawling space. The master guest suite turned out to be larger than Sophia's entire apartment, with a sitting area, a massive bathroom featuring a soaking tub that could accommodate a small party, and a bedroom centered around a king-sized bed. Sophia's modest belongings had been unpacked and arranged with military precision. Mr. Pickles, her drooping pothos plant, sat forlornly on the window sill. Your assistant even color-coded my closet, Sophia noted, peering into the walk-in space where her modest wardrobe occupied a tiny fraction of the available space. That would be the house staff, Alexander corrected. You'll meet them tomorrow. I've given them the rest of the day off to allow you time to adjust. Sophia turned to him, suddenly overwhelmed by the surreal situation. 24 hours ago she'd been in her father's hospital room. Now she was married to one of the richest men in the country, standing in a penthouse that probably cost more than she would earn in several lifetimes. This is insane, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Alexander studied her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. Would you like some time alone? Sophia nodded gratefully. Please, I'll be in my office if you need anything. Dinner is at 7. With that he turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed, reaching for her phone to text Mia. I'm officially Mrs. Billionaire. Robot, send help. Mia's response was immediate. How's the sex? Sophia nearly choked. It's not that kind of arrangement, boo. All that money and no orgasms, worst deal ever. Despite everything, Sophia laughed, then covered her mouth, worried the sound might carry in the cavernous apartment. She moved to the window, gazing out at the city stretched below her. Somewhere out there was the hospital, and tomorrow her father would be on his way to treatment that could save his life. Worth it, she reminded herself. All of this strangeness was worth it. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Yes, she called. Alexander's voice came through the door. I forgot to mention, there's a dress in the closet for tonight. We have dinner reservations at Elysium at 8. The press will likely be there, of course. They would. The public unveiling of Mrs. Sterling. Sophia opened the door to find Alexander standing there, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, a surprisingly human look for him. I don't recall dinner debut on today's schedule, she had said, crossing her arms. It's necessary, Alexander replied. The sooner our marriage becomes public knowledge, the better for all concerned parties. And the stock price, Sophia added dry. Alexander didn't deny it. Be ready at 7:30. The dress is Valentino. As he turned to leave, Sophia called after him. What if I don't like the dress? Alexander paused, looking back at her with that same flicker of amusement. Then by all means wear something else, contrary to what you might believe, Sophia. I'm not actually interested in controlling every aspect of your existence, just the important ones. She muttered precisely. He agreed without a hint of irony. Disappearing down the hallway, Sophia closed the door and leaned against it, blowing out a long breath. Then curiosity got the better of her, and she went to investigate the dress bag. The garment bag contained a simple yet elegant black dress with a subtle sparkle to the fabric. It was beautiful, tasteful, and Sophia checked the size tag. Exactly her size. How did he know? She read aloud, then remembered the thoroughness of Alexander's research into her life. She laid the dress on the bed, then walked into the bathroom to run a hot bath. If she was going to be paraded around as the new Mrs. Sterling tonight, she might as well enjoy some of the perks of her new life. An hour later, soaking in bubbles and sipping a glass of wine she'd found in a small bar in her sitting room, Sophia finally allowed herself to acknowledge the thought that had been nagging at her all day. Alexander Sterling was not exactly what she had expected. Cold, yes, calculating, definitely. But there were glimpses of something else beneath the surface, something almost human, and that Sophia realized with alarm might be far more dangerous than the emotionless automaton. She prepared herself to deal with Mrs. Sterling. How did you and Alexander meet? Sophia took a sip of her champagne, buying herself a moment to recall the carefully crafted backstory they'd agreed upon during the car ride to Elysium, the city's most exclusive restaurant, through a charity gala. She answered smoothly, aware of Alexander's attentive presence beside her. I was coordinating the event, and Alexander was a major donor. Love at first sight. The society reporter pressed her pen, poised eagerly over her notepad. Alexander's hand settled on the small of Sophia's back, his touch unexpectedly warm through the thin fabric of her dress. I knew she was special immediately, he said, his voice taking on a quality Sophia hadn't heard before, almost soft. Sophia challenges me in ways no one else dares to. Well, that part wasn't a lie. The reporter seemed delighted by this uncharacteristic display from the normally reserved businessman and the whirlwind romance. You've only been seen together publicly a handful of times. We preferred to keep our cow relationship private, Sophia interjected, leaning slightly into Alexander's touch in a show of affection that felt surprisingly natural. Until we were certain enough for marriage, the reporter noted with a smile. When you know, Alexander replied, his eyes meeting Sophia's with an intensity that momentarily stole her breath. For a split second, Sophia forgot this was all an act. The way he was looking at her, as if she were a puzzle he was determined to solve, made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the cade. The reporter finally departed, satisfied with her exclusive, leaving them alone at their corner table overlooking the city lights. You're good at this, Alexander observed, withdrawing his hand from her back. As soon as they were alone, Sophia immediately felt the absence of his warmth, but hid her reaction by taking another sip of champagne. I've worked enough events to know how to handle the press, though. I must say you surprised me with that she challenges me line. Very convincing. It wasn't a line, Alexander stated, matter-of-factly, cutting into his steak with precise movements. You do challenge me. Most people don't. Let me guess, they're too afraid of the great Alexander Sterling. Precisely. He glanced up from his plate. Fear or excessive deference makes for inefficient interactions. Sophia couldn't help but laugh. Only you would evaluate human connections in terms of efficiency. Alexander tilted his head slightly. How would you evaluate them? The question caught Sophia off guard. Was Alexander Sterling actually asking for her opinion? Authenticity, she replied after a moment. Mutual respect, the ability to be yourself without judgment, shared joy. She twirled her pasta thoughtfully. And in romantic relationships, there should be a spark, something inexplicable that draws you to the other person. Alexander considered this as if she presented a complex business proposal. Ineffable qualities are difficult to quantify. That's the point, Alex. Not everything valuable can be measured. His eyes narrowed slightly at the nickname, but he didn't correct her this time. Progress, Sophia thought with a private smile. The rest of dinner passed in surprisingly comfortable conversation. Alexander asked intelligent questions about her event planning career, and Sophia found herself genuinely interested in his latest project, developing affordable housing units, a venture that seemed at odds with his cutthroat reputation. It's still profitable, he explained, when she expressed surprise, just with longer-term returns and broader community benefits. So you do have a heart, Sophia teased, then immediately regretted it when his expression closed off. It sound business, he insisted, signaling For the chick, the moment of connection had passed and Alexander was back to his controlled self. Sophia felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Outside the restaurant, the paparazzi had multiplied their cameras, flashing as Alexander guided Sophia to the waiting car, his arm protectively around her shoulders. "Kiss her," someone shouted from the crowd of photographers. Sophia tensed, glancing up at Alexander uncertainly. Their contract hadn't specified public displays of affection beyond the basics. Alexander hesitated for only a moment before turning to her, his eyes asking a silent question. Sophia gave a nearly imperceptible nod. His hand came up to cup her cheek, surprisingly gentle. As he leaned down, Sophia's eyes fluttered closed automatically, her pulse racing as his lips met hers in what was meant to be a chaste publicity-serving kiss. But something unexpected happened the moment their lips touched. A jolt of electricity seemed to pass between them. What should have been brief suddenly lengthened, deepened as Alexander's arm tightened around her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, Sophia was breathless, her mind spinning. Alexander looked equally stunned, his usual composure momentarily shattered. As he stared down at her with darkened eyes, the cameras went wild, capturing a moment that had started as performance, but had somehow transformed into something neither of them had anticipated. Alexander recovered first, smoothly opening the car door for her. Once inside the privacy of the vehicle, an awkward silence fell between them that was. Sophia began, unsure how to finish the sentence. Convincing Alexander supplied, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "The press will have no doubts now, right?" Sophia agreed quickly. "That's what matters." Alexander cleared his throat, straightening his already perfect tie. "Tomorrow morning I'll accompany you to the hospital for your father's transfer. The jet will be ready at 7:00 a.m. The abrupt change of subject was almost comical, but Sophia was grateful for it. The last thing she needed was to analyze why her fake husband's kiss had affected her so powerfully. "Thank you," she said simply. They rode the rest of the way home in silence, each looking out their respective windows, careful not to acknowledge the tension that now hung between them. The next morning, Sophia woke to the sound of a gentle knock on her bedroom door. "Sophia, are you awake?" Alexander's voice came through the door. She glanced at the clock, 5:30 a.m. and quickly got out of bed, wrapping a robe around herself. Before opening the door, Alexander stood there, already dressed in a casual but expensive-looking sweater and slacks rather than his usual suit. A steaming mug in his hand. "Coffee," he explained, offering it to her. "Black with 1 sugar." "Correct." Sophia accepted the mug. Surprised, he noticed how she took her coffee. "Yes, thank you. We leaving 30 minutes. The medical team is already at the B hospital preparing your father for transport." Sophia nodded, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. "I'll be ready." True to his word, Alexander had arranged everything flawlessly. By the time they arrived at the hospital, her father was being carefully moved to the medical transport vehicle that would take him to the private airfield. Sophia held her father's hand throughout the transfer, whispering reassurances. Though she wasn't sure he could hear her, the specialists explained that keeping him in a medically induced coma during transport was safest. "He's in good hands," the head doctor assured her. "The facility in Switzerland is the best in the world for this type of treatment." As they watched the medical jet take off, Sophia felt Alexander's presence beside her, steady and unexpectedly comforting. "Would you like to go with him?" Alexander asked suddenly. Sophia turned to him in surprise. "What, to Switzerland?" Alexander clarified. "I can have the company jet ready within the hour. You could oversee his care personally." The offer was tempting, but Sophia shook her head. "The doctor said it would be weeks before he's conscious again, and I need to keep working, not just for appearance's sake. My job matters to me." Alexander studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "I understand, but the offer stands should you change your mind." As they walked back to the car, Sophia felt a wave of emotion crash over her: grief, hope, exhaustion, and strange gratitude towards the man beside her. Without thinking, she reached out and squeezed Alexander's hand. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. For all of this, Alexander looked down at their joined hands with an expression Sophia couldn't decipher. Rather than pulling away as she expected, he gently squeezed back. "You should rest today," he said as they got into the car. "I have meetings, but Rosa, the housekeeper, will be there if you need anything." Sophia nodded, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline of the morning was wearing off. "I think I'll take a nap and then call Mia. She's probably dying for updates on married life." Alexander's mouth quirked slightly. "Your friend is protective. She thinks you're going to lock me in a tower," Sophia admitted with a small smile. "Or make me sign a blood oath to your corporate empire." "Blood oaths are on Tuesdays," Alexander replied dryly. "Today is just regular paperwork. Sophia stared at him in shock for a moment before realizing he'd made a joke, an actual joke. She burst out laughing, the release of tension making it perhaps funnier than it truly was. Alexander watched her laugh with that same curious expression he sometimes got, as if she were a particularly interesting stock market trend. You should do that more often, Sophia said when she'd collected herself. What scheduled blood oaths? Another joke. Sophia shook her head in disbelief. No, be funny, it makes you seem almost human. I'll take that under advisement, Alexander replied, lied. But there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Back at the penthouse, Sophia did indeed take a nap, collapsing onto her bed, still fully dressed. When she woke hours later, she found a note had been slipped under her door. Sophia, I'll be home late. Don't wait up for dinner. Weekly charity Gaia. Tomorrow evening your presence would be appreciated, but not required if you're not feeling up to it. At PSS, I had Mr. Pickles move to the solarium. The kitchen plants were mocking his condition. Sophia read the note twice, a smile spreading across her face. At the postscript, Alexander Sterling, billionaire businessman, had not only remembered her plant's ridiculous name, but had apparently given it consideration. Perhaps this arranged marriage wouldn't be quite as cold as she'd feared. 3 weeks into their marriage, Sophia found herself settling into a routine that would have been unimaginable to her just a month ago. She continued her work at the event planning company, refusing Alexander's suggestion that she resign. My career isn't optional, Alex. In the evenings, they often share dinner, discussing their days with a growing ease that surprised them both. On the surface, they maintained their contractual arrangement perfectly. But beneath that surface, something was shifting. Tonight was the Sterling Enterprises annual gala, the biggest social event of the year, and Sophia's first official appearance as hostess. As the wife of Alexander Sterling, she was expected to shine. You look beautiful, Alexander said from the doorway of her room, his voice making Sophia spin around in surprise. She wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered with subtle beading, her dark hair swept up elegantly. The dress had arrived that morning, another of Alexander's selections that somehow perfectly suited her taste while elevating it. Thank you, she replied, trying to fasten a bracelet with shaking fingers. The importance of tonight wasn't lost on her. This was her debut to Alexander's entire business world. Alexander crossed the room, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Allow me, he offered, taking the bracelet from her trembling hands. Sophia turned, presenting her wrist. His fingers were warm against her skin as he deftly secured the clasp, his touch lingering a moment longer than necessary. Nervous, he asked, his voice softer than usual. Terrified, Sophia admitted. Half the business elite of the country will be there judging your surprising choice of bride. Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly. Surprising? Don't pretend you don't know what they'll be thinking, Sophia said, turning to check her reflection one last time. The middle-class event planner who somehow landed the city's most eligible bachelor. They'll be looking for the catch. The catch, Alexander repeated thoughtfully, is that I'm fortunate you agreed to marry me at all given the circumstances. Sophia met his eyes in the mirror, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. These past weeks have been— Alexander paused, seeming to search for the right word. Pleasant. Sophia couldn't help but laugh. Such high praise, Alex. Pleasant? Be careful, or I might think you're warming up to me. The corner of his mouth twitched. We should go. The car is waiting. As they rode to the venue, the city's most luxurious hotel, which Alexander happened to own, Sophia mentally rehearsed the names of key business associates she'd need to recognize. Alexander had provided detailed briefing notes, which she'd studied diligently. Remember, Alexander said as they pulled up to the red carpet, these people respect power. Don't let them intimidate you. As Mrs. Sterling, you outranked virtually everyone in the room except you, Sophia pointed out. Alexander gave her a rare, genuine smile. In public, we're equals. In private, his smile turned wry. Well, we both know you've never followed my instructions anyway. Sophia grinned back, feeling her nervousness ease slightly. True, I'm terribly inefficient that way. The moment they entered the ballroom, Sophia felt the weight of hundreds of curious eyes. She straightened her spine and slipped her hand into Alexander, drawing strength from his solid presence. Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, a photographer approached. Could we get a photo for the society page? Alexander's arms slid around her waist, pulling her close against his side. They smiled for the camera, the picture of wedded bliss convincing. Sophia murmured after the photographer moved on. Very, Alexander replied, but there was a strange note in his voice. The next 2 hours passed in a whirlwind of introductions and small talk. To Sophia's surprise, she found herself enjoying the challenge of navigating the social politics. Her experience as an event planner had prepared her well for handling difficult personalities and remembering important details. Alexander didn't tell us his bride was so charming, commented Elise Harrington, wife of one of Alexander's board members. And a notorious social gatekeeper. Alexander prefers to understate things, Sophia replied smoothly. It's why his quarterly projections are always so conservative. Elise's eyes widened slightly before she laughed. I like her, Alexander, she declared to Sterling, who had materialized at Sophia's side. She's not at all what I expected. She exceeds expectations in every way. Alexander agreed, his hand finding the small of Sophia's back in what was becoming a familiar gesture. As the evening progressed, Sophia caught fragments of whispered conversations. They seemed genuinely happy, never seen Sterling so attentive to anyone. Did you see how he looks at her? The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. Their pretend relationship was apparently more convincing than many of the real marriages in the room. When the orchestra began playing, Alexander surprised her by extending his hand. Shall we? Sophia hesitated, only briefly, before taking it. I didn't know you danced. There are many things you don't know about me, he replied, leading her to the center of the dance floor. Alexander turned out to be an excellent dancer, guiding her with the same confident precision he brought to everything. Sophia, who had learned ballroom dancing for work events, matched him step for step. Another hidden talent, Mrs. Sterling, Alexander murmured, drawing her closer. Then, strictly necessary for the waltz. I'm full of surprises, Sophia returned, suddenly very aware of how perfectly they fit together, her head tucked just under his chin. They moved in perfect synchrony, as if they'd been dancing together for years rather than minutes. Sophia felt herself relaxing into his embrace, forgetting they had an audience, forgetting this was all for show. When Alexander's hands spread wider across her back, Sophia's breath caught the heat of his palms, seemed to burn through the delicate fabric of her gown. Alex, she whispered, unsure what she was even going to say. His eyes, usually so controlled, darkened as they met hers. For a moment the rest of the room seemed to fade away. The spell was broken by the sound of shattering glass, followed by raised voices from the entrance to the ballroom. Alexander immediately tensed, his attention shifting over Sophia's shoulder. What's wrong? she asked, feeling him stiffen. Security issue, he said, Turley, stay here. But as he began to move toward the commotion, Sophia kept her hand firmly in his. We're supposed to be inseparable newlyweds, remember? I'm coming with you. Alexander looked like he wanted to argue, but instead nodded curtly, keeping her slightly behind him. As they approached the disturbance, a disheveled man in a wrinkled suit was arguing loudly with security guards at the entrance. I have a right to be here. This company destroyed my life. Sophia felt Alexander go absolutely rigid beside her as he recognized the man. James Porter, he said under his breath, former VP of operations. I had to let him go last year for ethical violations. Porter spotted Alexander and lunged forward, only to be restrained by security. You ruined me, Sterling. My wife left. My reputation is destroyed, all because I disagreed with your precious efficiency models. Mr. Porter was embezzling funds, Alexander explained quietly to Sophia, and endangering workers by cutting safety protocols to inflate his performance numbers. You're a heartless machine, Porter shouted as security began to escort him out. You don't care about anything but profit. Does your pretty new wife know that yet? Does she know what you really are? Sophia felt Alexander flinch almost imperceptibly at the words. Before she could think better of it, she stepped forward, still holding Alexander's hand. Mr. Porter, she said, her voice carrying clearly, my husband values integrity above all else. Perhaps that's something you should consider. Porter looked momentarily taken aback before security finally removed him from the premises. The crowd, which had fallen silent during the confrontation, gradually resumed their conversations. Though the mood had shifted, Alexander turned to Sophia with an expression she couldn't quite read. You didn't have to do that, I know, she replied simply. He studied her face intently. Why did you? Sophia hesitated. Why had she defended him? It had been instinctive, unexpected even to herself. Because she began, then paused. Because I've seen enough of you these past weeks to know you're not what he said. Not entirely anyway. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, vulnerability perhaps, or gratitude. Before he could respond, they were approached by an elderly man leaning on a cane. Quite a display of loyalty from your new bride, Alexander, the man said with a shrewd smile. Alexander's demeanor immediately changed, becoming more formal yet respectful. Judge Harrington, may I introduce my wife, Sophia? Sophia, Judge William Harrington, is one of my most trusted advisors. Sophia recognized the name as one of Alexander's board members. She offered her hand, which the judge took with old-world courtesy. A pleasure to meet you, my dear. I must say I was quite surprised by Alexander's sudden marriage, But now I understand. The judge's eyes twinkled. He's found someone who sees through his carefully constructed facade. Alexander shifted uncomfortably beside her. Judge Harrington enjoys overanalyzing situations, he said dry, and Alexander enjoys pretending he's made of stone. The judge countered good-naturedly. Been that way since he was a boy. His grandfather, my old friend, was the same. Brilliant men terrible at admitting they have hearts. Sophia couldn't help but smile at Alexander's obvious discomfort. With the conversation, the heart exists beneath the surface, she said, like an underground river. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there, shaping everything above. Judge Harrington looked delighted, poetic and perceptive. Alexander, you've outdone yourself. As the judge moved on to greet other guests, Alexander gave Sophia a questioning look. An underground river? Sophia shrugged, suddenly embarrassed. It made sense in my head. It was. Alexander paused, that same searching look on his face insightful. The rest of the evening passed without incident, though Sophia noticed Alexander watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. By the time they were in the car heading home, she was exhausted, but somehow exhilarated. You were magnificent tonight, Alexander said quietly. As the city lights flashed by outside the window, everyone was impressed. Even you, Sophia asked, the lateness of the hour making her bolder than usual. Alexander turned to look at her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. Especially me. Something warm unfurled in Sophia's chest at his words. This wasn't part of their agreement, this genuine admiration, this growing connection between them. When they arrived back at the penthouse, Alexander walked her to her bedroom door, as he did every night, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that had surprised her from the beginning. Good night, Sophia, he said, his voice lower than usual. Sophia hesitated, suddenly reluctant to end the evening. Alex, he waited, watching her with that intense gaze that seemed to see straight through her. Thank you, she finally said, for trusting me to represent you tonight. Alexander stepped close, so near she could detect the subtle scent of his cologne. Thank you for defending me. You didn't have to. Maybe I wanted to, Sophia admitted softly. For a moment neither moved. Sophia was acutely aware of her heartbeat, of the mere inches separating them, of the way Alexander's eyes dropped briefly to her lips before meeting her gaze again. Then, with visible effort, he stepped back. Good night, Sophia, he repeated more formally this time, as he turned to walk away. Sophia called after him. Alex, he paused, looking back at her over his shoulder. I received a call from the clinic in Switzerland today. My father's showing brain activity. The treatment is working. Alexander's expression softened immediately. That's wonderful news. Yes, Sophia agreed, a lump forming in her throat. And it's because of you. Alexander shook his head slightly. No, it's because of what you were willing to sacrifice for him. Their eyes held for a long moment before Alexander continued down the hallway toward his own rooms. Sophia closed her bedroom door and leaned against it, her mind racing. This arrangement, this marriage of convenience, was becoming something neither of them had anticipated, and that terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. I think I'm falling in love with him, Sophia confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, as she sat across from Mia in a quiet corner of their favorite cafe. Mia nearly choked on her latte with Robot Man. Are you serious? Sophia nodded miserably. It wasn't supposed to happen. It's completely irrational, honey. The heart isn't exactly known for following contractual obligations, Mia said, reaching across to squeeze Sophia's hand. But are you sure this could just be Stockholm Syndrome or something? It's not that, Sophia insisted. He's different than I thought. There's so much more to him beneath the surface. He's brilliant, of course, but also thoughtful in ways no one would expect. Last week he rescheduled a board meeting because it conflicted with my video call with my father's doctors. Her father had woken up 2 weeks ago, and though recovery would be slow, the gnosis was excellent. Alexander had ensured Sophia could speak with the medical team regularly, and had even arranged a secure video connection to her father's room. That's basic decency, not love material, Mia pointed out. What about the fact that he has Mr. Pickles placed in the sunshine every morning, or that he remembers how I take my coffee and sometimes brings it to me in bed, or that he actually listens when I talk, really listens, even about things that have nothing to do with business? Mia's skeptical expression softened. Okay, that does sound promising, but Sophia, what happens when your father recovers completely, when your contract ears up? This whole arrangement has an expiration date. The thought sent a cold spike of dread through Sophia's chest. She'd been trying not to think about that, about the inevitable end to this unexpected chapter of her life. I don't know, she admitted. Hume's never given any indication that he wants more than what we agreed to have. You Mia challenged. Sophia shook her head. How could I? What if I'm just convenient? What if he's just being kind because we're stuck in this situation together? There's only one way to find out, Mia said sagely. You have to tell him the truth. The very thought made Sophia's stomach twist with anxiety and risk making the next 6 months unbearably awkward. If he doesn't feel the same, no thank you, so you'll just suffer in silence. That doesn't sound like the Sophia Mendes I know. Before Sophia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Need to cancel dinner tonight, emergency board meeting, don't wait up. Sophia frowned at the curt message. It was unlike Alexander to be so abrupt these days. Problem asked, noting her expression. Just Alexander canceling dinner, Sophia said, trying to hide her disappointment. They'd fallen into the habit of sharing meals and conversation. Most evenings a routine. She'd come to treasure board meeting on a Friday night. That's weird, even for workaholics. Sophia shrugged, trying to ignore the knot of unease forming in her stomach. That's business, I guess. But as the day wore on, her uneasiness grew. When she returned to the penthouse that evening, it felt eerily quiet. Without Alexander's presence, Mrs. Sterling rose up. The housekeeper greeted her. Mr. Sterling left a file for you on the kitchen counter. He said it was important. Sophia thanked her, puzzled. A manila folder sat on the marble countertop. Unmarked, she opened it to find a stack of papers with legal letterhead. As she scanned the first page, her blood ran cold. Dissolution of marriage agreement. Alexander had drawn up divorce papers. Sophia sank onto a bar stool, her knees suddenly weak. The document outlined a generous settlement, custody of all plants currently residing in the penthouse, and a complete fulfillment of all promises regarding her father's medical care. But why now? Her father was improving, but the doctors had recommended at least another 6 months of specialized care. Their agreement was for a full year, and they were barely halfway through. Unless Alexander had tired of the arrangement, unless he'd found their growing closeness as uncomfortable as she found it exhilarating. Hot tears blurred her vision as she reread the document. Everything was perfectly correct, perfectly appropriate, perfectly Alexander, except for the timing and the fact that he'd left it for her to find rather than discussing it with her first. Sophia pulled out her phone to call Mia, then hesitated. No. This was something she needed to handle herself. She changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, grabbing her teas and purse. She knew exactly where the emergency board meeting would be held, in Alexander's office at Sterling Tower, where all major company decisions happened. 30 minutes later, she stood in the gleaming lobby of Sterling Tower, her determination slightly faltering as the night security guard eyed her suspiciously. I'm Sophia Sterling, she said with more confidence than she felt. My husband is in a board meeting upstairs. The guard checked his computer. I don't have any board meeting listed, Mrs. Sterling. Sophia's suspicions deepened. Call his executive assistant Vivian, she'll confirm. I should be allowed up. After a brief phone conversation, the guard nodded and handed her a visitor's badge. Mr. Sterling's office is on the top floor. I know, Sophia said quietly. The elevator ride to the executive floor gave Sophia time to collect her thoughts, to temper her hurt with reason. There must be an explanation. Alexander wasn't cruel. She knew that now, even if she'd once thought otherwise. The executive floor was dimly lit, with only security lighting illuminating the hallways. Sophia made her way to Alexander's office at the end of the corridor. Surprised to see light spilling from beneath the door, she hesitated, then knocked firmly. Come in, came Alexander's voice, sounding tired. Sophia pushed open the door to find him sitting behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, a rare sign of stress from the normally immaculate man. Alexander looked up, shock registering on his face when he saw her. Sophia, what are you doing here? She held up the manila folder. Funny, I was going to ask you the same thing. Emergency board meeting. Alexander's expression grew guarded. You weren't supposed to find that yet. Clearly, Sophia replied, her voice tight with hurt. Were you planning to ambush me with divorce papers over breakfast? Or maybe just have your lawyers serve me? Alexander stood slowly. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, Sophia demanded, her voice rising. Explain why you're ending our agreement early. Explain why you didn't even have the decency to tell me to my face. Because I couldn't. Alexander's rare outburst startled her into silence. He raped a hand through his hair, confirming her earlier suspicion. I couldn't look you in the eye and suggest ending this marriage knowing it was the last thing I actually wanted. Sophia froze. What? Alexander moved from behind his desk, his usual controlled demeanor fractured. Your father's doctors called me directly today. His recovery has exceeded all expectations. He won't need the specialized facility. After next month, they're recommending transfer back to a local hospital for outpatient rehabilitation. That's wonderful news, Sophia said, confused. But what does that have to do with divorce papers? Everything, Alexander said, his voice strained. Our arrangement was predicated on your father's medical needs. Without that obligation binding you to me. Understanding slowly dawned on Sophia. You think I'd want to leave immediately? That I've just been enduring you until I could escape? Alexander's silence was answer enough. Sophia felt a hysterical laugh bubble up. You ridiculous man. For someone so brilliant, you can be incredibly dense. Alexander's brow furrowed. I don't understand. Sophia took a deep breath and stepped closer to him. I was miserable tonight because you canceled dinner, not because I'm obligated to have dinner with you, but because I look forward to it every day, because somewhere along the way this arrangement, this marriage of convenience, became the most real relationship I've ever had. Hope flickered across Alexander's face, quickly tempered by caution. Sophia, if you're saying this out of some sense of gratitude— Oh, shut up, Alex, Sophia interrupted, closing the distance between them. I'm saying this because I'm in love with you, you impossible man. And if you bothered to talk to me instead of drawing up legal documents, you might have discovered that for once in his life. Alexander Sterling appeared completely speechless. Sophia watched as a kaleidoscope of emotions crossed his usually stoic face: disbelief, hope, and finally a joy so naked it took her breath away. Say it again, he requested softly, his voice rough with emotion. Sophia stepped closer, reaching up to cup his face between her palms. I love you, Alexander Sterling, not your money, not what you can do for my father, just you, with all your spreadsheets and efficiency models, and that brilliant mind that somehow can't comprehend simple human emotion when it's staring you in the face. Alexander's hands came up to cover hers, his touch gentle yet urgent. I've been falling in love with you since the day you called me a calculator in your father's hospital room, he confessed. I've never met anyone who challenges me, surprises me, and understands me the way you do. The thought of you leaving once our arrangement ended— he shook his head. I couldn't bear it, so I thought I'd give you an easy way out before I became even more attached. Sophia laughed softly. For a strategic genius, that was a terrible plan. Clearly, Alexander agreed, a real smile transforming his face. I've been operating with incomplete data. And what data would that be? His eyes held hers, suddenly serious. That you could possibly love me too? Sophia's heart swelled. Well, now you have all the relevant information. What's your analysis, Mr. Sterling? Alexander's answer came in the form of his lips meeting hers, soft at first, then with growing intensity. Unlike their kiss for the cameras, this one was private, real, a silent communication of everything they'd been afraid to say aloud. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Sophia. No contracts, no arrangements, no obligations, just me loving you. If you'll have me, I'll have to think about it. Sophia teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Perhaps we can negotiate terms. Alexander laughed, a full rich sound that Sophia realized she'd never heard before. What terms would you propose, Mrs. Sterling? First, you never again make major decisions about our relationship without consulting me, Sophia said, suddenly serious. Agreed, Alexander replied immediately. Second, you continue to give Mr. Pickles premium window rec placement. The plant is clearly your favorite child. I wouldn't dream of relegating him to inferior lighting conditions. Sophia smiled, trailing her fingers along the collar of his shirt. And third, we make this marriage real, not for appearances, not for business advantages, not for medical bills, just for us. Alexander's eyes darkened with emotion. Those are acceptable terms, he murmured, brushing a tender kiss against her forehead. Though I feel I should counter with a proposal of my own. Oh, Sophia raised an eyebrow. And what would that be? Alexander took her hands in his. Let me do this properly. To Sophia's astonishment, he lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands. Sophia Mendes Sterling, I have never believed in fate or destiny or any force I couldn't quantify until you. Will you marry me again? But for real this time? Tears of joy sprang to Sophia's eyes. Are you really proposing to your own wife? I'm proposing to the woman I love, Alexander corrected. The paperwork is incidental. Sophia laughed through her tears. Yes, Alexander Sterling, I will marry you again with no contracts except the ones in our hearts. Alexander stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that promised a lifetime of real connection, real partnership, real love. 6 months later, I still can't believe you rented out the entire botanical garden for a wedding reception, Sophia said, leaning against her husband's shoulder as they watched her father dancing with Mia, his recovery nearly complete. It was efficient, Alexander replied with a straight face. One location, maximum privacy, and optimal aesthetic conditions for Mr. Pickles to serve as ring bearer. Sophia laughed, tipping her face up for a kiss. You just wanted to see my face when I saw all those orchids. That too, Alexander admitted, his eyes soft with love as he gazed down at her. I'm a businessman, Sophia. I recognize a good investment when I see one, and marrying you twice is the best deal I've ever made. Around them, friends and family celebrated their renewal of vows, a ceremony that had made official what their hearts had known for months. No press, no business advantages, just two people who had found love in the most unexpected of arrangements. Who would have thought? Sophia mused that being forced to marry an arrogant, cold millionaire would turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Alexander's arm tightened around her waist. I prefer to think of it as strategic life partnership with unforeseen emotional dividends. Sophia rolled her eyes affectionately. Romantic as ever, Mr. Sterling. I save my true romanticism for private, he murmured against her ear, making her blush. Speaking of which, Mrs. Sterling, I believe we have a honeymoon to begin. As they slipped away from their own reception hand in hand, Sophia reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought them here. A marriage that had begun as a business transaction had transformed into something neither of them had been looking for, but both had desperately needed. Sometimes, Sophia thought, as Alexander pulled her close for another kiss under the starlit garden sky, the coldest hearts simply needed the right person to thaw them, and sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most perfect endings.